Hello, welcome. This is Freethought Forum, and we're sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. And I'm Joe Barnhart.
And I'm Larry Rhodes, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
Okay, and this is a call-in show, which means we would welcome your calling in and talking with us, see how we develop our thinking together. And the Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a full or fun meeting at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meeting is where? Barley's?
Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria in the Old City.
That's at 5:30, huh?
5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed, that's easy for me to say, look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table, or you can just simply look for the largest table in the main bar area.
Okay, now the Rationalists of East Tennessee have monthly meetings, and the first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures and lively discussions, table discussions, and book club meetings on the second Sunday. And the Reflections group get together on potluck.
On the
that's
fourth
Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Now, next month we'll be having a book club meeting on the second Sunday. That's the Rationalists. They'll be meeting at the Books A Million store, which is on Walker Springs behind the Shoney's, 2 o'clock on the second Sunday. The book will be Fields of Blood, Religion and the History of Violence.
That's a big book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been a long time covering a lot of violence.
Okay, today's topic is, will humanism replace religion, or what is humanism? We want to talk about humanism and how it applies to our lives daily.
Yeah. Well, what is humanism? Would you like to address that first?
Sure, but you've got two views of it. That first view is it's a view that replaces theism. And another view, it's a broader view, is it's human values. It's saying that many groups of people have different views of religion, yet they can share very much similar values.
Mm-hmm.
Those are human
They're common
values.
core values that humans have to be able to get along.
That's a
in
good
society.
way to put it. It's not, it's an if-then. If you want to have a peaceful society and be happy, then you have to have a rule against stealing.
That's right.
You have to have a rule against killing.
And misrepresenting yourself.
Exactly,
Yeah.
lying.
Mm-hmm.
And you also need a society, if you're going to be happy, you've got to control envy.
Mm-hmm.
And so Moses did not discover all those. Those rules existed long before a guy named Moses, if he really existed.
I like what Hitchens has to say on the subject. The fact that humans have been around, say, 100,000 years. They evolved 100,000 years ago. Before that, there were pre-humans. But humans have been around at least 100,000 years. Some say 200,000. So according to Christianity, I mean, if what they say is true, then we wandered around killing each other, maiming each other, stealing each other's wives, and not forming any kind of community at all until Moses went up the mountain.
Yeah. Now, that's the conservative Christians. Mm-hmm. Most Christians that I know don't think Moses was the first one to discover.
Well, no, it
ethics.
obviously wasn't. And
he had a mother, for one thing.
Yeah. Enlightened Christians, or liberal Christians, the newer ones, are generally more educated on this point.
Oh, yeah.
And
no question.
the conservative Christians just look at the Bible as the source. And
that's a good way to put it. The conservatives tend to take the Bible as an infallible document that dropped in out of the sky, practically.
Right. And this is a call-in show. Don't forget, we have the number at the bottom of the screen. We're going to be talking about humanism for the next hour. We welcome your calls, and the lines are open.
So, as a humanist, we have to ask, how does human ethics begin? What's your idea on that?
Well, I would think they would begin with empathy and compassion.
I like that, yeah.
That you'd have to understand that there are other people like yourself, and you know what you like and what you don't like, and that you would be able to project those onto other people and be able to form a common society.
In fact, here's a book called Emotional Intelligence, and it's saying pretty much what you're saying. It is empathy.
Smart man.
Is the basis of emotional intelligence. And that's the ability to put yourself into another person's situation. And that takes brains. Yeah, you have to think about,
Right.
and you have to feel, and it's called sensitivity.
And empathy and compassion are some of the things that are missing among psychopaths and
It's a good book.
sociopaths.
Yes.
Some people literally do not have compassion and empathy for their fellow man. They learn to pass. They learn to pass in society so they can get along and get a job and raise a family. But they simply lack it. They don't know how to understand that.
Yeah.
But thank goodness most of us come with that.
Yeah.
Come with that value.
Yeah, there's a book, it's called, I think it's either the Psychopath or the Sociopath Next Door, I've forgotten which. But it's a study of these people who basically have no conscience and no empathy, and therefore no sympathy.
But it's a mental illness. It's a mental condition that, thank goodness, is very rare.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that some animals can identify with other species, particularly the small ones. It's almost genetic in some animals, and I think it's probably genetic in us. But what we've discovered, I think, is that a child needs to be nurtured and cared for so that it can learn to trust. And it's what I call the social womb.
Right.
There's where the men can come in and help.
And there are several levels of trust. There's trust for the family unit, trust for the village or community, the general social trust that has to be nurtured at each stage of the development. So, it's good that we can do that in our society. So we have a cohesive society enough to do that.
I like that, cohesive. Let me try an experiment. Let's suppose you're a counselor. And this helps to see what humanistic ethics are. Let's say I'm a counselor, and you come to me, and you're a Jehovah's Witness. Now, my wife had been a counselor, and she sometimes counseled Jehovah's Witnesses. As a humanist, her job was not to try to convert Jehovah's Witnesses to some other point of view.
Right.
Her job was to try to understand their concern and their apprehension and try to work within their system and then work so that they could put things together. Now, if they change some of their views, that's their business. But the job of a counselor is not to be a preacher or a salesman.
Right. Unfortunately, there are some religious counselors out there that are so trained and oriented to their religion that that's all they teach.
They tend to be hustlers then.
Yeah. I remember at the end of my first marriage, I went to a marriage counselor. Well, it was more of a divorce counselor. It was after the fact.
Yeah.
And the first one I went to was a Christian counselor. And the first thing she did was march to the board and start drawing God this and God that and Christian rules and stuff. And this was supposed to be my counselor.
Yeah,
the one that's supposed to be helping me through this transition through this tough period.
Now that's violating her rule as a counselor.
Right.
That is not counseling. That's hustling.
Yeah. I have to tell you, it didn't take me long to get out, get up and get out.
I had two very good students when I lived in Texas, in the Dallas area, and they started off as divorce mediation counselors.
Right.
And then one of them later became a mediator for companies and corporations when they had their conflicts among it. And his job is basically humanistic values. In fact, he's the one who put me on the trail of this book, because he's trying right now to teach doctors to listen carefully and not just come in like engineers, but to have what you call empathy. And a nurse should have empathy, trying to say, I now understand how you feel and why your apprehension. In fact, they've studied that if a person goes into surgery and has a lot of apprehension going into surgery, that's going to have an adverse effect
Right.
on the surgery.
Mhm.
So part of being a good doctor is to be having humanistic values.
Right. And understand where the person themselves was raised, how his family worked, the type of society he came from. You would treat people with different histories differently
That's a good
in
way to
order
put
to
it,
be
yeah.
able to get them to a healing spot or healing place.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's go back into humanism a little bit. One of the things that fundamentalist Christians and other Christians too will come to an atheist and say, well, how do you get your morals?
Uh-huh.
I mean, we talked about empathy and compassion, but they believe in tangible morals, or what do you call it? Morals that you can hold in your hand, like a Bible.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah.
What's the word for that?
Well, now some Christians hold to what's they call general revelation and special revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And general revelation is what you learn from nature, and that includes science and common sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Objective. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get to.
Okay.
But-
Yeah, we'll talk about objective.
Sure.
That's a good.
Okay.
And then what they mean by special revelation is what they get through the Bible or the Quran, depends on what religion they come from.
Yeah.
But now, when I was in seminary, I had a teacher who made it quite clear if you got special revelation, it cannot contradict common sense.
Right. And not only that, but you can't expect other people to buy into it if you receive the revelation.
Yeah.
Then how are you going to convince your fellow man that you didn't just make them up?
Exactly. Exactly.
Again, Hitchens says that which can be put forward without evidence can be denied without evidence. So
Exactly.
you have no evidence, you're just saying it, and you put yourself in the position of every huckster and shyster in the world and in history, just standing on a stage saying, I got revelation from God. I mean, it goes on every day, but
Well,
prove it.
see, I think you could agree with me. Every believer is an unbeliever. For example, if you are a Methodist or a Baptist, you are an unbeliever when it comes to Joseph Smith and his golden plates.
Mm-hmm.
You're an unbeliever when it comes to Muhammad. You don't think Muhammad got these divine revelations.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the Muslim doesn't necessarily
Believe you.
doesn't
Mhm.
believe what Joseph Smith said.
Right.
So all believers are, by definition, unbelievers. Nobody believes everything comes in his head.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
And I'm saying, and I think you would agree, that all rational thinking and all faith has to have skepticism. You don't have just faith in general. There's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to have a faith and you don't want it to be blind faith, then you've got to say, well, does this make sense for me to have faith in this? If I have faith in you, I can't say, well, I have faith in Larry, because we're not being specific.
Well, that's a different usage of the word, a different definition of the word. Faith in means that you trust that person to
Exactly.
not hurt you, not harm you, to treat you well. Faith, a religious faith, though, is believing things that without evidence or in spite of evidence to the contrary.
Well, I think you could say that there are people who are not, quote, religious, can sometimes have blind faith.
Mm-hmm.
Let's suppose I marry someone out of blind faith, or someone marries me out of blind faith, trusts me, but doesn't really have enough evidence. And so what I'm saying is faith is trust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the real question is trust. I don't trust you as a football player. You don't trust
You're
me.
right to do that.
So but someone says, you have faith in me, Joe. I said, in what? For what?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be very specific.
Yeah, but there's the religious faith that, I mean, it may not even require a person, but I mean, I have faith that the Red Sea parted. I don't know. I have faith that
It's a good way to put it.
an angel came and killed all the firstborn of Egypt. I mean, or that something is reading my mind right now and going to punish me for wrong thoughts. There's no evidence to that, but at the same time, you believe it.
Okay, I think you were saying every faith in entails a faith that.
No, I'm saying they're different things.
Okay.
I mean, I may have faith in my wife as far as
That
she
entail-
won't cheat on me or do things to harm me, or the household.
That includes that. If you're saying that she won't do this,
Right.
that she will not or will do this. Every faith in
Yeah,
there,
but I have a lot of evidence to that effect.
Well, that's
where
fine.
I'm saying religious faith is faith without evidence, or in face of,
well,
in
it
the face
depends
of
on
contradicting
it depends on the
evidence.
religion. Now, John Dewey wrote a book. The title of it slipped my mind. But anyhow, he's a naturalist. But he wrote a book on religion.
Yeah.
And it's a naturalistic religion. It's non-theism. See, what I'm trying to say is we use the word religion in a great variety of ways, and it's not always with theism. Now, it isn't my job to tell people how to use the word. My job is to find out how they are using it, but not impose my definition on them.
Right.
Just say, okay, you're using the word this way, and I can talk with you then. So
Well,
I don't stumble over the word
Right.
faith or religion.
Right. Well, I do because
Go ahead.
because a lot of times when I'm talking to religious people, they will equivocate. They'll start off talking about this, and then they'll switch over to here for a different reason, for a different definition of the same word, and then try to get me to agree with it. And I have to be wary about that.
Well, some do.
I just looked up the word faith, and there are 8 different definitions for it.
Good way.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
You have to be careful that a person's not going to say you have faith that you can press on your brake on your car and it will stop the car. So you use faith too.
Sure.
So he's switching from everyday expectation faith to religious type faith and trying to get me to agree. You see what I mean?
Here's where you and I differ. I think in both cases it's expectations. Where you and I are in agreement, we're saying some expectations don't come off. And therefore it's a blind faith.
Yes.
And I have a lot of faith I have faith in this chair right now.
Mm-hmm. But it's not blind faith. It's faith built on years of experience.
So, and I think everybody who has a religion has faith that I would call sensible.
Yeah.
Because I want to break down religions into specifics.
Yeah, but
some aspects of it.
when you say
go ahead.
that they have faith that is what? What was the word you used?
But every faith in has faith that.
No, just it was last sentence. You were saying that every religious person has faith that is normal or regular, or you used the word.
Okay, well, never mind what I said since we can't remember.
Okay.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that people use the word faith, and rather than think there's a general definition that covers all cases, just find out how they're using
Right.
the word.
Exactly. You need to define the word that you're using so that you can use it for that purpose, but then you don't want to allow someone to switch purposes in the middle of the argument.
Exactly. And that can be done by people who are religious or people who are not religious.
Certainly.
I have faith in my dentist, but not to take out my appendix. So
That's good.
I'm saying that all of it is specific, and we have to find out what's the object of the faith.
And it's not blind faith.
No.
You have faith in him to take out your
Exactly.
teeth because of his education and his expertise, but not your appendix.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have reasons, you have evidence, you have expectations in a certain area.
Now, here's a book I want to mention.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's get back to humanism, and you're probably going to bring up a book on humanism.
Here's a book by a Jewish rabbi analyzing the Apostle Paul. And he's a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
His analysis of the Apostle Paul's development, how his religion started, makes a lot of sense to me. I don't agree with all the Judaism, but this rabbi has made some really good insight that I would not have had I not read his book. So what I'm trying to say is I don't have to agree with every person 100% in order to learn from him.
Right.
And that includes whether they're Christians or Buddhists or whatever. If they've got making sense, then I want to take it. And I know a lot of Christians make a lot of sense in certain areas. In certain areas, it doesn't make sense. But that's probably true of me.
Yeah. Can you tie that to humanism? I mean,
Yes, this guy acts like a humanist. He's honest in trying to understand this view and doesn't cheat. In other words, when you analyze something, you let that other person say what they're saying and not impose your own meaning.
Okay.
Oh, we got a phone call coming in.
Okay. Sounds good.
Go.
Welcome to the show. You're on Freethought Forum. You're on the air now. Can you give us a name or a nickname?
Yeah, my name's Randy.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you try it again?
Yes, sir. My name is Randy.
Good.
Hello, Randy.
Hey,
You-
guys.
You have a comment or question for us?
Well, I'm curious. Was there ever a? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Hold
yeah.
your ear. Okay. In your years of experience, when you were young, one of you mentioned that you were in the seminary, I believe.
That'd be Joe. Mm-hmm.
And so, at that point in time, you were in the seminary. Did you believe in God then?
Sure. Oh, sure, yeah.
And so, what confuses me, I called in last week, and one of the things the lady mentioned was, well, it's up to the believer to prove that there's a God. And, it's really not up to me to prove to you that there's a God. It's really up to you.
No,
And so I'm curious as to
the
when
reasoning
you were in
behind that?
seminary. Pardon me?
The reasoning behind that claim or the statement?
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. Let's see
Well,
what...
Well, because if it comes down to me having to prove to you, then that's simply a belief system that I may have.
Sure.
That I'm more focused on trying to convince you of what I believe instead of what's true or not. So I guess what I'm getting at is if there is a God, then the story of Jesus, do you believe that, or do you believe that he existed, or?
Well, okay, let's talk about the historical Jesus question. Amongst biblical scholars, whether Jewish or Christian or atheist, there are a lot of good scholars in this area. They know, because they've spent years working at it, it's very difficult to nail down specifically what, for example, in the story of the Gospel of Matthew, says at the crucifixion there was an earthquake, tombs opened, and people walked out of their tombs. Did that actually happen or not? You see. Now, the point is, all religions, and all atheists too for that matter, make claims to be true, but each specifically has to be examined if they're important enough to see if they are true. Now, I don't think those tombs opened in the first century and people walked out of their tombs, even though it is in the Gospel of Matthew. Paul does not mention it in any of his epistles. It's not in Matthew. It's not in Mark or Luke or any of the rest of the New Testament.
Another thing is, if God, you ask us if God existed, then do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, you're asking a couple of atheists. If we had Muslims sitting here, they would say, God exists. Which God? They'd say their God, Muhammad. I understand it's the same God, but a lot of people don't. Mm-hmm. But they would say, no, Jesus didn't rise from the dead, and they would believe in the same God you did. If we were Hindus up here, we would say, which God? You're talking nonsense. The God you're talking about doesn't exist. There are 10,000 gods that are worshipped in the world today. The statement that you're asking us is a version of Pascal's wager. You're saying, why don't you believe in God? If you believe in God, you'll go to heaven. If you don't believe in God, you'll go to hell. Well, that's a false dichotomy. There are 10,000 different gods. And even to a Christian, if you say, okay, I believe in God.
Let me
go ahead.
interrupt.
Certainly.
Go ahead.
If there's 10,000 gods, do you really believe that?
No, I don't believe in any of them.
But you just said that there were 10,000.
No, there are 10,000 gods that people believe in and worship throughout the world today.
What he's saying, there are many, many views of God.
Yeah, there are lots of
Interpretation.
religions.
Okay, let's go back to the original question, which was,
Good.
do you believe there was a Jesus? Do you believe that Jesus lived?
Okay, that's a good, sensible question. I think you could make a case that there was somebody in the first century named Yeshua, or Yeshua, okay? Because there were a lot of mothers who regarded Yeshua, or what we call Joshua, as one of the great heroes. So they were naming their son Yeshua. Some of them had some teachings. And probably you could make a good case there was a teacher named Yeshua in the first century, and he may have had some followers. My own view is he really thought that in his hidden day, God would come down with angels and transform the world. And he died on the cross mistaken. That's my view.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. I don't have any problem believing that Jesus was real. He may very well have been a rabbi of the first century.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, do you believe that King Richard was real? He may have been real. He may not have been real. There may have been myths built up around this king, but he could have been real. But do you also believe that dragons and Merlin and magic and all the stuff that goes with them are real? That's our position.
What I was really trying to, I guess, get to was, if he was real, if he is real, if he did exist, and you examine the life that he lived, there's no flaw. I mean,
Go ahead.
if he did live, and he healed people, and he fed people, and he did miracles, and he claimed to be the Son of God, and let's either accept that that's true or not. I mean, it's either in historical documents besides the Bible, which, I mean, if you went to the seminary, you got to know that. It's
Okay.
not just in the Bible.
Okay, here's what we're trying to say. See what you think about it now. It's one thing to say there was a man in the first century named Jesus, or Yeshua, okay? Then you've got to ask about all the specifics that are attached to this name. For example, did he feed 5,000 people miraculously? Did he raise Lazarus from the dead miraculously? Now, I would say that none of these miracles took place. That's all fiction. The same as, say, some Christians would say, Joseph Smith did not get these golden plates, and he did not translate a language he didn't even know so that you get the Book of Mormon. That's fiction. Are you with me?
Yeah. Well, then, the men that wrote about this man, then were they crazy? Were they liars?
Well, we don't.
What would be their motive?
Okay, now the trouble with that question, it's sensible. Okay? It's a good question. I think I would go this far to say we don't have any evidence that Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or John, whoever these people were, had any eyewitness account of a historical Jesus.
The people that wrote the books in the Bible called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We have no idea who they were.
No, we don't. See, those names were given later in the 2nd century mostly. Are you with me?
And even if they were what they call, if they said they were, I mean, who they said they were, and they were eyewitnesses, eyewitness accounts are one of the least reliable accounts in any court of law. David Hume, 300 years ago, said that if somebody says that they witnessed a miracle, that means that to believe it, you would have to believe that the laws of nature were bent or broken in favor of that over the fact that the witness could have been lying or mistaken. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I think what you and I are, and Larry are starting on is common sense. And we have
Well,
to...
see,
Go ahead.
here's what I think. Here's what I believe. I believe that everybody on this planet... Well, let me go back. When you were in the seminary, did you ever pray to God?
Of course, yeah. I prayed to... Go ahead.
What happened that now you don't believe him, that you wouldn't pray to him?
Okay. First of all, a person just doesn't change basically all at once. You make modifications a bit at a time. And then you look back somewhere along the way and you realize you have moved far away from what you once held to, say, 10 years earlier. You see what I'm getting at? You make slow, mild, tiny modifications, and those eventually add up to a big change.
You were talking about him being in the seminary. Have you ever heard of the Clergy Project?
No, I've not.
Okay, you might want to write that down and look it up. The Clergy Project is a project started by Dan Barker and Daniel Dennett. These are clergy who are still preaching in the pulpit. Many of them have gone to seminary and become ordained and are preaching in churches today, but they've lost their faith. They no longer believe it. But they do have that information and the education that Joe is talking about, but they don't have any alternative but to stay in there and preach. And the reason is if they came out of the atheist closet and told people they were atheists, they would lose their friends, their family, their job, and the entire social network in which they're embedded. There are a lot of people that know an awful lot about religion that still don't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
There are 400 people, I think, in the Clergy Project
and
right now.
I would argue this. Stay with me a little bit.
Okay.
I don't believe that Paul went to the third heaven to meet Jesus. He did. Okay? And
What do you mean he did? You said you don't believe he went to the third heaven to meet Jesus, but then you said he did.
He did believe it.
Oh.
Now,
Okay.
my point is that Paul was also doing some very hard thinking. And some of his hard thinking makes a lot of good sense to me. Are you with me?
Yeah.
His notion of justification by faith in the context in which he wrote, dealing with the Torah and the law, makes a lot of good sense. Now, in another context, people would use a different language. But what he is basically dealing with is you've got to live in a society with laws. You also have to live in a society with grace and forgiveness. Any society that's going to survive has to have both these. Are you with me?
Yes.
And Paul, in my opinion, in his language, was dealing with this very substantial problem. And I think I have learned a lot from Paul, even though I don't buy his theistic outlook, and I don't think he went to the third heaven. I think he was just thinking very hard to come up with some good conclusions. You see what I'm going with this?
Right.
You asked a question a little earlier about what might their motive have been for writing this stuff and embellishing it so much. They were starting a new religion. They were trying to get it going. They were trying to distance themselves from Jewish traditions and start a Christian religion. Pretty much everything they wrote was based on one premise: to get the reader to believe. And that is still shining through their works. I mean, that's what their purpose of their books were written for: to get believers.
Well, I guess what I really think is that all of us here know that there is a God. All of us, including you and anyone on this planet. And
We did.
Go ahead. Make your point now.
Well, I've been around some people who claim to know Christ, and I've been around some people who truly are true believers in Christ, and the change in their lives and what they do for the people around them. And, you know, I just think about all the organizations that go to help, you know, that are Christian organizations that have relief and humanity relief. And, you know, I'm just curious if there's any atheistic groups that
Well, of course we do. Any charitable organization that is not specifically religious is secular. They're not using religion to promote their charity.
Now you mentioned Jesus. Do you believe that the Jews can be moral and do good things in the world? They don't believe Jesus is the Savior of the world.
Sure, I think we all have the capacity, but do we have the propensity?
And they believe in God.
The
same God.
But let me get back with you. I'm not talking about propensity. Are there actually good, hard-working, honest Jews in the world doing good deeds in the world? And they don't believe Jesus is the
Do you
Savior
think
of
not?
the world.
You're hesitating.
Well, I'm thinking, I'm absorbing,
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
I do. I mean, again, I think we all have the capacity to do good, but does that make us good?
Okay, my point is, you did say that there were many Jews who are gracious and good and practice what you would call good, decent ethics. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what you're saying.
Okay.
And are there atheists who do this too?
Sure.
Okay, that's fair enough.
But that doesn't make us good.
Okay.
None of us.
You mean we
None of
can't
us are
be
good.
good
Okay.
unless we believe in Jesus? Is that it?
Oh, absolutely not. We can't be good because we can't be good.
Well,
We're born not good.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I have. So the main problem I have with Christianity is we're born into sin and we have to apologize for being human for our entire life. I don't buy it.
Yeah,
we
so-
are good.
I mean,
Okay, you hold to.
let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
Let's say that there is a God. You said you used to believe there was a God, but did God exist because you believed he existed, or does he exist because we believe, or does he not exist whether we exist, whether we believe it or not?
And this gets into the area where you were talking about claims. Let me ask you, does God exist?
Yes.
Okay. I don't believe it.
And you know what?
You're making a claim, and I'm just saying I don't believe it.
Okay.
But you know, in your heart of hearts, no matter what you say to me, that you do.
Okay.
And at a point in time, you did. And what I would ask you to do is, when you're driving down the road tonight, ask
Here
him
we go.
again if
through
he's
with this
real.
caller?
You know, you want to hang up now?
Yeah, if you're going to start preaching to us.
No, go ahead.
I'm not preaching to you. I'm giving you an opinion that you once held yourself.
Okay.
So, I guess what I'm really getting at is if he is real, then if I'm wrong...
Well, again,
Okay,
that's Pascal's wager.
Here's an idea. See what you think. Let's assume there is a God, okay? Let's assume he's good. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Does that God need your belief in order to be happy?
No.
Okay. So, there's a passage in, I think in Micah. What does the Lord God require? It's love, justice, and mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Are you with me?
Okay.
Now, an atheist can love justice and mercy, and he can walk humbly. Would you agree?
I agree.
Okay. Now, if there's a God and he's decent, then that person should not have to worry. If God is indecent, then he's got hell, and I would say that's no God. That's a projection of mean people who project a God in their own image, and they are wicked for doing that. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Hell was,
Sure.
the doctrine of hell was invented by wickedness of the human heart.
So you believe there's wickedness? Do you believe there's good and evil?
Well, let's put it this way.
Not objectively, no.
I think. Well, sure. There's evil and wickedness. I'll give you an example, and I think you would agree. Adolf Hitler was a pretty wicked human being.
But why do you say that?
Okay. Now you're asking me where ethics comes from, right?
No.
Okay.
I was asking on your personal stand what you think.
Okay.
Not about ethics.
Well, that is
Well,
ethics.
that is ethics.
You-
In other words, you've got a set of ethics or values, and then wickedness is whatever is going contrary in a vicious way.
harm. That's a simple guide.
Yeah.
If you harm your neighbor, either physically, mentally, or financially, then you are acting in a wicked way toward him. And it doesn't require religion or God or afterlives or souls to understand that.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. What you're saying is that regardless of whether you believe in God or not, that y'all, I say y'all meaning atheists, because I don't know a whole lot about them, but that y'all do have a premise for what is right and wrong.
Sure,
Yes.
sure, yeah.
Of
In
it.
other words, if I start stealing your car and your money, you can say Joe's a pretty evil
That's
person.
evil.
You know,
But at the same time,
you ought to go out and work for a living.
yeah,
You would
it's
say.
not it's an embodiment of evil, but it's not objective evil
Yeah.
like Satan or a demon or
Oh,
something
no,
like
no,
that.
no. You don't need a demon to
Yeah.
tell you what evil is.
One thing I'd like to say, we have a meetup after this show. It's down at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. And this is what we do. We sit around and we talk. And we invite people who are interested in these topics, would like to sit down with any of us and just discuss this stuff. There's usually 25 to 30 of us down there, and it usually goes till about 8 o'clock.
Well, the whole point with me calling was just to address. I thought the lady that was there last time I called, which was the first time I've ever called, was, had made the comment that I would have to prove. It's up to the believer to prove.
Well, it's up to the person making the claim. If you claim that you had a dragon for a pet, then that's a claim you need to provide some evidence for. We would just say, I don't believe it. And that's not a claim. It's just it's a rejection of a claim.
What if you're wrong? What does
Then,
that mean?
again, that's Pascal's wager. You're talking about one specific God and one specific religion. There are 10,000 religions in the world, and there are no religions. What if you're wrong and the Muslims were right? What if you're wrong and the Hindus are right? What if you're wrong and whatever? You will go to somebody else's hell. It's a saying I always like to bring up at times like this: is everybody's going to somebody else's hell.
I think that more than likely that.
But we don't believe in
all
that.
over.
Go
I understand.
go ahead.
But I don't know that really matters. It would be like my son claiming that I wasn't his father, but being a father, that would never change my love for him.
That's a good point.
True.
And so, I guess what I'm really getting at is I'm not here to persuade you or to change you or your thinking. It's just simply to voice that love, that no matter what we do here, no matter what it is when it's over, that love that I would have for my son would be the same that God would have for all of us, you and me.
Sure.
And
That's a great principle to live by. I honor you for saying that.
Well, yeah, so your view of God is a pretty decent view of God. And it's not the same God as some Christian. For example, are you familiar with Jerry Falwell?
Yes, sir.
Your view of God is not Jerry Falwell's view.
More Pat Robertson.
Yeah, Jerry when you think of Jerry Falwell's God, most people, from his point of view, go to hell. Most people, and this God knew it beforehand. Before he created the human race, he knew this God, on Jerry Falwell's God, this God knew that most of the human race would be in eternal misery.
And he knew that Eve was going to eat the apple, and he placed the tree there anyway and allowed Satan to get there. And just his omniscience is self-contradictory, but that's why the stories don't stand up.
Yeah. Now, your view of God is quite different from that, I can see.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I used to not believe, and I was raised in a church, and I changed from that, and then I just, I turned back around and came to my realization
Okay.
that,
Well, you're...
what
go ahead.
what I'm experiencing now
Well, that's okay.
is much greater than without it.
Yeah, you have modified your religion, I'm taking, over the years. You don't hold to what you held when you were a child.
Well, I don't know if that's true because, I'm 56, so what I had as a child at 10, 11, 12,
That's a different version, maybe.
sure.
Well, that makes sense, sure. So that's about all we're saying, is people modify and change. And it seems to me the view of God that you're talking about is much different from some people who call themselves Christians. Their view of God is greatly different from your view.
Yeah.
And my hat's off to
Too
you. Yours sounds pretty decent. So that your God would not necessarily send somebody to hell because he's an atheist.
Right.
Okay.
And I don't believe that.
See, what's interesting is people like you and people like me have an awful lot of values in common. You strike me in your values as being pretty much a humanist, and I'm in my values a humanist. And we just differ on this theological view.
Yeah. I just really believe that all of us know.
Well, that's
Whether there
not
is a
the
God.
case. There's a man sitting out here answering the phone. You talked to him when you called in. He was raised in a secular, non-religious home and has never had a belief in God.
But I still don't believe that. I believe that all of us
You are allowed
that
to
have
believe whatever
lived
you
here-
like.
Okay.
It's just we're telling you contradictory
Okay, well,
stories here.
it's kind of good to be in a country where you can
believe whatever you want.
You can disagree but not be disagreeable.
Right.
Well, thank you for calling in. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We've
And
gotta go
remember,
there. Our
you're
time
welcome
is
to come
running out.
down and talk to us. Have a beer and eat dinner with us if you like.
Or if you like me, have a Pepsi Cola.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank
you.
you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, how much
Yeah.
more time do we have?
We have about 10 minutes.
Oh, good. Let's go.
So we
Well,
have time for another
that was
call
good.
if somebody has been waiting to get the line clear.
It was a very interesting caller, and I appreciated his
Well,
insights.
let's define humanism, if you'd like.
Okay.
What would you say it is, offhand? I've got a few things here I'd like to, but I'd like to have your...
Well, I
Your
think
Christian.
humanism, you used the word community earlier, and I think humanism is basically the values and the ethics that make a decent human society and community. And we all know what some of the basic rules have to be.
Okay, well, let's go over some of those rules. One, this is one list. There are several lists. Free inquiry.
Sure.
The separation of church and state is one of the strong planks of humanism.
Exactly.
The ideal of freedom, individual freedom, ethics based on critical intelligence. So which we were talking about a little bit earlier.
That's good.
Compassion and empathy based on rational thought. Being able to rationally understand another person, another perspective, and respect it and encourage it.
This caller was a good example. He was working hard to understand us, and we were trying to working hard to understand him, and that's humanistic ethics.
Another thing is moral education, which we did discuss a little bit. The concept of harm and not harming your neighbor in any way, emotionally, intellectually, employment-wise, physically.
Yeah.
Do no harm. The religious skepticism, of course, which is fairly evident for
Well,
us on the
skepticism
show.
is basic part of thinking. You can't think without having some skepticism. Belief and skepticism, the right wing and the left wing,
Right.
they both are necessary for flying.
And reason, science, and technology, that's a fairly evident plank in the platform of humanism, along with evolution, because we got here somehow. And there has to be an explanation of that, and evolution is the most widely accepted and
Among scientists.
supported theory for how humans arrived on this earth. And of course, it's all based on education. Without education, you would have a hard time understanding pretty much most of these planks, at least having an in-depth understanding of them.
Sure.
There are several humanist associations out there. Of course, there's the American Humanist Association, the British Humanist Association, Humanists of Canada, Australian. There's a Council for Secular Humanism, which is an international group. Gay and Lesbian Humanist Association.
Okay.
Humanist Association of Ireland, Indian Humanists, and the Philippine Atheist and Agnostic Society, which are humanist associations.
Now, I was very closely associated with the secular humanists, with Paul Kurtz when he was still living. And I found that was a very interesting group of people to work with. And I've been with other groups, and they had humanistic values. And the seminary I went to, I want to be part of humanism is fairness and accuracy. The seminary teachers I had seemed to me to have basically humanistic values. Their grading system was open, so that you didn't have to guess what it was. They taught clearly, and you can disagree in class and have discussions, and you could revise your opinion, and all of those seem to be good humanistic values.
Yes. Well, we mentioned the Humanist Manifesto. What would you, what do you mean by manifesto?
It means putting it out there.
Putting it down on paper?
It's not the communist
so
manifesto.
that we, no,
Yeah, but
for sure.
It's making it public.
Not even a socialist manifesto. It's an ethics manifesto.
It's an ethics, yes.
Yeah.
It's a putting out there so people can look at it and see if they identify with it.
And sign under it or not,
Yeah,
that type of thing. I know that a lot of people in America today wouldn't sign the manifesto simply because of the evolution platform on it. 43% of Americans still believe that humans arrived on this earth fully formed all at once, which we don't have any scientific evidence for that happening.
When I was in seminary, we raised the question, if there was an Adam and Eve, did they just start speaking
English
with good grammar right off?
Yeah.
First day they were talking in good grammar, or did it not take time to learn their grammar? And that's a sensible question, it seems to me. The first man and woman, we don't know where the first man and woman was, in my opinion, because it evolves.
Well, we have fossils of pre-human ancestors from the Olduvai Gourd in that area of eastern Africa, and we have evidence of several waves of humans coming out of Africa, going north into into Europe and over into Asia. But where the first fully formed human appeared, no, and we probably never will. Fossils are an exception. When something dies, it generally just disintegrates. It takes special conditions for a fossil to survive. Falling into a creek, that would do it as long as it was covered by sediment. Falling into the ice or the tundra would do it.
Let me recommend a book. It's called Emotional Intelligence. And it's a book that is by Daniel Goleman, Goleman. And it's an attempt to try to develop this empathy you're talking about in all the professions, like the medical profession, in the business world. And in fact, I'm working now with a man who goes around from business to business, trying to help them to see, if you're going to be a boss, you've got to understand the people you work with. You can't just hand down laws.
Well, you can, but it
you-
doesn't work very well
No.
for the end product.
If you want it, you got it. In other words, he says, when all else fails, try being a human. and that's what he wants to do, is to go around and teach people to be more and more compassionate and understanding. And he's very strong on hard work. Okay, we got a
have
phone call. Let's go real quickly. One call. Go ahead.
You're on the air with Freethought Forum. Can we have a name or a nickname, please?
Charlie.
Go ahead.
It takes just a minute for our audio to catch up with you. Would you try that again, please?
Charlie.
Okay. Hi,
Okay.
Charlie. You're on the air. What do you have for us?
Yeah, all I want to do is tell y'all don't believe in God.
That's right.
All right. The only thing I got to say is, if you want to insure yourself, which I can prove you wrong,
Uh-huh.
go to a United Pentecostal altar, and that's the church that teaches the true Christianity. I'm not preaching to you. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
True Christianity. That's the only church. Most of them churches out there are false.
Okay, let me
so
ask
United Pentecostal, or
Okay.
whatever church teaches what the Pentecostal teaches
Okay.
is true.
Let me ask you this. Do you believe in hell?
Yes, there's a hell.
Do you think Catholics are going to hell?
It's a false church, yes.
Okay, how about Baptists?
If they're not baptized in Jesus' name and ain't got the Holy Ghost, yes.
Okay, so how many people are going, what percentage of the human race is going to be in heaven?
Whichever ones has got the Holy Ghost and baptized in Jesus' name.
You know the question I'm asking, go give me a straight answer.
There'll be more in hell than there will be in heaven.
Okay, that's a pretty pathetic religion. That's the best your God
And
could
it's
do.
certainly
huh?
not empathetic. Yeah.
That's the
Well,
best. That's the best
No
your God
compassion.
could do. Let me ask you
Everybody's
this.
going to hell but
I
us.
just want to let
Yeah.
y'all know that if you go to the United Pentecostal altar or the altar call, and you step up there with a repentant heart, God will prove you wrong.
Let me ask you this. Did your God know that that the great masses of the human race would be in hell
When
before
he created them.
he created them?
Well, he knows everything, man.
So the answer is yes, right?
So he
Well,
created them anyway, just so he could torture them forever?
He repented in Genesis about creating man. That's when he burnt the flood of Noah.
Well, does that
Let him have all another start.
does that mean he made a mistake?
Well, in my opinion, yes. He
And
made a mistake, but he repented.
Well,
Who did he
He
repent
even
to?
brought the flood. Let him have another
Who did
chance.
he repent
okay,
to?
are you saying here you have the Lord God who is omniscient, knows everything, and he fouled up?
But he's God. Who are we to
Well,
question
well,
a
you-
holy, righteous
We
God?
got to close the show. Thanks for calling. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. He ducked the
Yeah.
question, didn't he?
Well, everybody else in the world is wrong and going to hell. So,
Okay, well, we want to thank our callers for
Yeah,
helping to make this an interesting program.
Yep.
And
for sure.
I wish we'd had more time with the last caller. We just didn't. The one from the
And
Pentecostal
remember,
background.
when we leave the show, we're going down to Barley's Tap Room Pizzeria. We're going to have probably 20 to 30 people down there that just love talking about this stuff. So if you're interested in furthering the conversation, come on down.
Be welcome, yeah.
And you're welcome as long as you don't preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch. Thank you, Matt Delahunty. And we'll see you down there, I hope.
Okay,
Anything
well-
else, Joe?
Well, I hope we made clear that humanism is something to look into,
Right.
and look it up on the internet and see
Right.
what you come
Look
up
up Humanist Manifesto.
with. Human Manifesto.
Okay.